Hi everybody, Bearded Rogue here again, and we're going to do another video on BGGCon. This time I'm going to be covering the prototype games that I played at BGGCon. This list is not nearly as extensive as some of my other lists. The prototypes that I play at an unpub or in the unpub area of an Origins are going to be more extensive. But that said, I still got some prototypes played that weren't my own, which was really cool. I did play 3 of my own prototypes. We'll cover those last, but I want to focus on everybody else's stuff first. I played some amazing prototypes this year, y'all. Like, there was not one game amongst them that was a bad game. As a designer, it excites me and makes me nervous because I'm excited for all these designers who are very easily, I say easily, but who are going to have these games showing up on shelves. Like, publishers are going to want these games. They're genuinely good. And at the same time, it makes me nervous because it makes me feel like I need to really up my game to keep making sure that my stuff makes it onto shelves. So, without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into it. So the first one I want to talk about is Stir the Cauldron from John Brieger. And John, if I'm pronouncing your last name incorrectly, please let me know. I met John for the first time in person at BGGCon. We have interacted on Twitter quite a bit. He does playtest tips of the day that are fantastic. I highly recommend checking it out. He has very systematic methods for playtesting, which I think serves him very well, and I'd love to talk to him more about such things in the future. I'm hoping to maybe have him on Breaking Into Board Games at some point to talk about it. He takes extensive notes. He has some very clear and clever ways that he tracks things, and it's really cool to behold. But that's not what you're here to hear about. You're here to hear about Stir the Cauldron. So Stir the Cauldron is a really cool game in that it is a pulling cubes out of a bag game, except instead of a bag, you have a little plastic cauldron, which is really freaking cool. So you're all witches, and you're all, trying to brew up potions, and everybody has a set of cards that they start with that let them do a couple of things. The primary things that they let you do are place your ingredient cubes, which you have in your own color, onto the various recipes that are sitting out on the table. They're all big tarot-sized cards with a whole bunch of slots for ingredients. And once all of the ingredients are on that card, it can then be added to the pot and brewed. One of your cards lets you brew, one of your cards lets you pick up all of the cards that you've used up to this point. The other option is you just use all of your cards, including that one, and then you get to pick everything up. But what's really cool is you place all of your cubes out on the cards out on the table using your hand of cards. And as you fill up all the spaces, eventually one of the cards will fill up. Once it fills up, you'll tip all of the cubes from that card into the cauldron, shake it up, and then you'll draw a certain number based on what's listed on the card. Then you'll look at what comes out of the cauldron and look for majorities. Whoever has the majority of cubes that came out then either gets to choose whether they want to take victory points or whether they want to take the recipe. The reason you would take the recipe is because the recipe is another card that you can add to your hand that almost guaranteedly has a better ability than what your starter cards have. So you can then add that to your rotation and chain it in with your other abilities. Or you can just take points, and points are how you win the game. So you have a choice there. The other reason why you might want to take the card is because there are some goals turned up at the beginning of the game that are communal goals that everybody's trying to get. And they may be things like, the person who has the most, or the person who has the most of this particular type of ingredient on their cards, or the person who, or anybody who has 2 oranges or 2 greens or whatever the various things are. But they're communal goals that you're also trying to meet to get points. So you can get points by completing the various recipes as they come out, or you can get points by meeting these communal goals, or anytime you choose to brew a potion using your base card, your standard card, you get a victory point to incentivize you to brew. But here's why it's all interesting. Because there's some cubes that are already seeded into the cauldron. So when you complete the first formula, the first potion, you tip all of the cubes from that card into the cauldron in addition to what's already there, and then you draw the cubes. So you may not have any cubes on that first card, and you may still win majority in that card because of what was already in the cauldron. And the recipes get harder, the potions get harder to complete after as each round goes on. There are 3 rounds. But you don't necessarily have to be involved with something in order to be able to choose whether you want the card or to get the points for it. Every round, all of the cubes that are in the cauldron will be removed. But at the beginning of the game, there's some that are seeded, and then every time a formula is completed, more cubes get added. So when that 4th formula gets completed, you're pulling from the sum total of all of the cubes that have been added that round, minus any that have actually come out. So it could get to the point where you complete 2 and you don't get either of them, but now the entire cauldron is your cubes, and you're pretty much guaranteed to get one or the other of what's left. It's a really clever little game. It plays really fast. It plays very, very intuitively. The Concordia or Century Spice Road style of playing your cards until you choose to play a card that draws them all back, or you run out of cards to play and are forced to draw them all back, is a really clever little way of balancing player actions. Incentivizing brewing the potions by giving you victory points for doing it is really clever. The overall goals being different every game, the collective goals really change up how you play. I think it's a really slick little design. I really like it. If they can get it with the little plastic cauldron, or even like a manufactured chipboard cauldron that's all fancy like the pyramid in Camel Up, I think it's a runaway hit as far as games go. I really enjoyed it. I think it would be really good with gamers of almost any sort, and it plays really quickly. So yeah, that's Stir the Cauldron. Good game. Liked it. Next, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Ouroboros, which was a completely cooperative game designed by J.R. Honeycutt. And I say completely cooperative because there are basically 2 end states in the game. If everybody stays good, then all the players win if or any players who stay good win if the person who has the most of the victory point shit, I think it's essence at the end of the game, is a good player. So if you're good, you want somebody who is also good, including yourself, to have the most VP at the end of the game. Or if you turn evil, you win if you have the most VP at the end of the game. Here's where it gets complicated, though. You're given some cards, and in between you and each other player at the table is a threat that you are dealing with. Your kingdom and your neighbor's kingdom are dealing with. These threats have icons on them. Your cards have icons on them. They sometimes match. You hope they match, because the only way to deal with the threats is to actually play cards that make up the threats on that have the icons of the threats that are on either side of you. So if you have something that has like an axe, a sword, and a star, for example, I don't remember what exactly the icons are, then you and the person next to you that's on the other side of that threat collectively have to play those 3 icons towards that threat in order to neutralize it. There's a couple of wrinkles here, though. One, every player is dealing with 2 threats, one to their left and one to their right. You only have 3 cards, and it takes 3 icons to defeat either one. So ideally, you could, if everybody was willing to work together, go in a circle, and everybody send, 2 icons to the right and 1 icon to the left. However, you don't necessarily have the icons you need to deal with the threats that are there with you, and that's where it becomes very interesting. The other thing you can do with your cards is you can basically play them icon down. So instead of turning them towards the threat, they instead become attacks against the other players, which means that you are taking the victory points from them instead of trying to protect the victory points or the kingdoms from the various threats. So there's a few incentives to do this. Number 1, having the most is always good, whether you're good or bad. Number 2, sometimes you won't be able to defeat the threats, so making sure that you yourself are sitting pretty is not a bad idea. In addition, sometimes you'll just take the hit for what's going on. Like, you won't play any cards to attack, or you won't play cards that are going to help you with the threat, because at the end of every round, the 3 cards that you play pass around the table to the person to your left, clockwise around the table. So if you're really cooperating, you can get into an interesting rhythm where you'll say, okay, I can do X and Y, can you do Z? You can't do Z. Okay, what cards would you like to have next round? And they can look at their hand, which is a 5-card hand, and go, okay, I have this icon and this icon, so don't send me another one because duplicates won't do me any good in this case. Go ahead and send me these. And maybe they're trapping you and maybe they aren't. It's just a really interesting social experiment game of backstabbing that is completely cooperative, and I really enjoyed it. I think JR said it was like his second, maybe third time playing it, and it was really good, like right out the gate. I had a really good time with it. None of the players at the table disliked it. It's not everybody's cup of tea because it's, a backstabby type game, but it's really well done, and the playtest alone resolved some fiddliness of how you revealed the cards, and a few other minor things. And some of the conversation that happened afterward makes it even more exciting, in my opinion, to see where this one's going to go. So that's Ouroboros from J.R. Honeycutt. I really enjoyed that one too. Next, we're going to go ahead and talk about a game called Franchise. Franchise is from 64 Ounce Games. Richard there has been working on it for a while. I played it at last year's Unpub. And this was one of the more interesting playtests that I was involved in for 2 reasons. One, sometimes playing your game at a higher player count than you expect it to be can showcase some of the, I won't say flaws, but the, negatives in your design. They won't necessarily be apparent at lower player counts because of time issues or just in general. Now, that's not to say that this is always something you should do. Yes, let's playtest every game we have at a higher player count than we think it supports. It can be an interesting experiment to see where things break down. It can also be an interesting thing to see where the core of your game is. What is fun about your game to people. Having that many people around the table, they'll have more time just in general to think about what it is that they're enjoying and what it is that they aren't. So interesting experiment. I'd never thought of doing something like that, but it was a cool little thing. The other thing that I learned is that if you take out a prototype amongst a bunch of designers at a table, and you are bearing your soul to all of those designers in this industry are really good people. A game could be not ready for prime time. A game could be totally ready for prime time. Doesn't matter. Designers are going to take care of you as another designer. They understand what it's like to put your soul out there on the table and let everybody play it. It works really, really well to play test with other designers for that reason. It helps that sometimes they may have some insightful ideas of what you could do to correct any issues that crop up in the playtest. But what I love most about it is if you have a game that you're considering shelving or that you think maybe it's time to hang up, play it with other designers and see what they say. It may be enough to get you pointed in the right direction and get you going again. It was a very intense playtest. We stopped it early. It revealed a whole bunch of things about the game that were really good. It revealed some things about the game that didn't work for whatever reason. There were all sorts of discussions had about it. Richard was amazing in listening to all the feedback and taking everything in, and I really look forward to playing the game again. With all honesty, nothing is better than playing a game after the designer has had time to make changes from a playtest like that. When you have a playtest that basically strips your game down, vivisects it out there in front of multiple designers, and they're all looking at it and examining it and giving you advice on how they could help you, or exactly what they would do in your circumstance. And then you go home and you think about it and you brew on it yourself and you make the changes you want to make to address their concerns. Because don't just do everything they say. Do not do everything that your playtesters say. Down that path lies madness. But I can't wait to play it again. I think it's going to be a much better game than it already was, and I already enjoyed it. I played it last year and enjoyed it. I played it this year and enjoyed it again. I think this is going to be the next step in its evolution, and I cannot wait to see where it goes from there. It has a very social Euro dynamic to it, very much like a... I won't say like Settlers of Catan, but there aren't as many social Euros being released these days. Most of them are really math-heavy number-crunching things that don't encourage like cooperation between players in any kind of regard. This one is like that, and I think it's kind of interesting that it is. It'll be cool to see what happens with it. Again, I'm looking forward to playing it again, even if it's not until next year at BGG. So, Richard, if you're at BGG next year, make me play franchise, because I want to. Just remind me of that fact. You won't have to force me or twist my arm. Just remind me that I said I want to play franchise again, and we'll make it happen. So yeah, that was a really cool game. Look forward to seeing where it goes in the future. Next one that I played was Networks, the Executives expansion from my good buddy Gil Hova. Gil knows that I love the Networks, and he's been playtesting the heck out of this expansion, and it is probably my favorite kind of expansion. It's the kind of expansion that doesn't change a whole bunch of rules or muck with the base formula. It takes a game that's already good and adds a layer on top of it that lets you explore it in different ways. So in this case, everybody gets an executive, and all of the executives slightly tweak how the game is played. So one of the things in the Networks, if you haven't played it, are genre bonuses. You get bonuses if your TV station has multiple shows in the same genre. I mean, it kind of works that way in the real world. The Sci-Fi Network showed sci-fi stuff until it stopped. The Cartoon Network showed cartoons until it stopped. You get what I mean. But in their heyday, they had focused programming. It may be sci-fi and action, whatever in that regards. So typically you get a bonus whenever you have 3 shows of the same type that have aired on your network. And then you get another bonus when you have 5 shows of the same type that have aired on your network. The executive that I played instead wanted diversity. They wanted the grab bag. They got benefits for having the most different shows, which changed the game quite a bit. It made made a decision previously that was very laser focused into something that was a little bit more open, but at the same time, like, everybody else is still focusing. So you're trying to like horn in on all of their action to some extent because you need as many different types as possible, and everybody else is, siloing themselves in as appropriate. So it creates a little bit of conflict with everyone in a good way at the table, in that you're after a little bit of everything and all of them are trying to focus and you're kind of stepping in all of their ways. Really, really clever. The other characters all interacted in different ways with the game. One was really good at using stars. One of them was had the ability to choose that they were going to draft first every round, or they could get money, which was really cool. So they had this like push and pull cycle. It's going to be really awesome to see everything. Like, I backed it. I can't wait for it to come out. Being able to play it a little bit early and add some feedback to it, and everything was awesome. And I'm even more confident now that it's going to be exactly what I want out of the expansion for that game. So I'm super excited about that. See, the last two games that I played that weren't mine, the last two games that I played were from Daniel Newman, who is one of my best friends in general, and online at conventions, anytime I can spend around Daniel is good time spent. I love playing his games. They're always something very interesting and creative. I just really, in general, enjoy them. At Origins, I played several of his prototypes. This time I got to play two brand new prototypes, or at least brand new to me. I don't know how long he's been working on them exactly. I know one of them started very, very recently. The other one, I'm not so sure. The first one is the Science and Seance Society, which I love that title. It's so fun. Was a very interesting game where it's asymmetrical two-player game. One person is science and one person is seance, effectively. And the one person is trying to get all of these cards into a specific order, 1 through 5. There are two colors of cards, white and black, and you have one color that you're trying to get in order. In order to do that, you're using the abilities on the cards, which are all double-sided, and various other things to try to restructure the row and everything like that. While you're doing this, the other player is rolling dice and placing those dice onto these cards. They can do a couple of things. They can either claim the card out from underneath you, which means that your row reorders and all of your plans have now have to reconfigure based on this new change. They can lock down cards so you just can't use the abilities on them, all the while they're trying to complete goals on their side. The difference being is that they have a limited amount of dice. And so if they put too many dice towards pursuing their goals, they're not blocking you enough from completing yours. If they use too many dice to try to block you, then they're not pursuing their goal heavy enough. So it's this very interesting dynamic. It was a really cool two-player game. There's still tweaking and balancing and all sorts of stuff like that would need to happen with it. But it felt really interesting and really cool. It was kind of like one person playing the Tower of Hanoi puzzle, trying to move everything to where it needed to be, and another player playing more of a dice placement type Euro game, and figuring out where to best allocate their dice to forward their own agenda. Really neat little game. May or may not continue to see the light of the day, but I had a blast playing it. And then last but not least is Watch, which is a worker placement game with a very interesting twist. So the idea behind Watch is that all of you work in a old Russian munitions factory that has been turned into a manufacturer of watch parts. It wasn't cleaned out very well. There's still munitions lying around all over the place. So your goal is to earn victory points by basically smuggling out munitions building watch pieces and selling them off and or using them in other ways. But the wrinkle is that there's an overseer's office, which can be occupied by a neutral party or can be occupied by a player. So when I occupy the overseer's office, the first thing that I get to do every turn is I get to choose which areas of the place I'm watching based on my own personal camera rating. So in the beginning, I get to choose one area with a card. And if anybody goes to that area, then they have to bribe me to be able to take their action. As I upgrade my cameras, I can watch 2 or even 3 areas. All of the areas that can be watched are the risky areas. There are non-risky areas inside of those locations as well that you can go to. So as the players who aren't in the Overseer's office, you're trying to decide, what do I need to do? Do I want to take the riskier action, which always has a heavier payout, but the Overseer might know that that's what I want to do, so they might watch me? Or do I take the safe route and just kind of build up over time? Meanwhile, you can kick the Overseer out and become the Overseer, and then rifle through the files that are in the office, which is another way of getting victory points. It's a really interesting, clever Euro. Everybody has basically 2 workers that they place, and turns are snappy, it moves really quick, and it has this interesting conceit of the Overseer's office that leads to some pretty cool stuff. I really like it. I can't wait to play it again. Like, I wanted to play it again at BGGCon, and that never happened. I only got to play it the once. I would gladly play it again anytime Daniel asked me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with his next set of changes. Either way, next time I see Daniel, I will be playing this game, and at some point I will be playing this game out of a box on my shelf, because somebody's going to publish this one, I guarantee it. Really, really good game, and I really enjoyed it. So, very briefly, the 3 games of mine that I played at BGGCon were Fire in the Library, Go Die, and Back to Earth. Fire in the Library was playtested a whole bunch because, as everybody knows, we're spinning everything up with weird giraffes. John and I are, so that this can be kickstarted in the new year. So we're playtesting all of our wordings, playtesting all the mechanisms, making sure everything works, going through just the game to hammer out all of the details so that we can be ready for Kickstarter once it arrives, and make sure that, reviewers have copies in hand and everything's, hunky-dory before we move to that piece. So Fire in the Library testing has been in full swing, and that happened a lot at BGGCon, so far so good. People seem to really like it. I really like it, but people seem to really like it, and the changes we've made since signing with Weird Giraffe have all been really well received, and I think have made it a better game, so I couldn't be happier with my publisher relationship on that one. Next one was Back to Earth. I played it twice. I played it once the first night I was there, before I had a meeting with a publisher, and it kind of self-destructed on me, and I was feeling very, very down on myself, but I was sitting there with Daniel Newman and Chris Rollins. Couldn't have had better allies sitting at the table with me as we talked through what worked and what didn't, and how we could achieve the same effect in a slightly different way, and exactly what we could do. And we came up with something that was freaking genius. Like, the collaborative brain power of the 3 individuals that were at that table came up with something fantastic. So I introduced that fantastic thing in my meeting with the publisher, my pitch meeting. Everything went really well. It needs a little bit more refinement because when I brought it to them, it was, pen on cards. So obviously we need to tweak some stuff there to make that work a little bit better. But it played fantastically. People liked it. The publisher liked it enough that they really want to do it. It's basically a handshake deal at this point. Back to Earth is going to be with that publisher. Sorry, I can't say who it is because that's not mine to say. That's totally their department. But Back to Earth is going to be coming out, and I am so excited to see this game that's evolved and changed over time with some advice from fantastic people in the industry, including the developers who played it at BGGCon. It's going to be a really good game, guys. Like, I'm super stoked that this thing that I've been working on for a couple of years now is finally going to be coming out towards you guys. Really good. The last thing I played was Go Die, my 2-player game. I played it. It still works. It does the same thing that it has been doing. There's still probably a little bit of a second player like imbalance. The second player has an advantage, and the changes that I've tried making to alter it have kind of combated that a little bit, but maybe not quite enough. So I don't know. One of the big things about Go Die is Japanese, and is all about elemental harmony, like living in harmony with the elements. And so one of the things I was looking at is if I cannot correct the imbalance so that the second player has an advantage in a competitive game, then perhaps I can tweak the theming a little bit and have it be all about balance, and instead make it a cooperative game where both players are monks meditating, trying to achieve harmony with the world. And so the players are trying to achieve the same score or something to that effect, while manipulating the world to change their score and their partner's score in positive or negative directions. I don't know. I haven't tried it co-op yet. It was just an idea I had because the idea of a game that's, you know, all about cooperating to bring yourselves in tune with the world and each other seems like maybe something that we could use a little more of. And, you know, who knows? Maybe I'll figure out the second player imbalance and it'll be available as a little 18-card 2-player game that way, but an 18-card 2-player cooperative game isn't a bad idea either, so who knows. But yeah, that's the prototype stuff that I played at BGGCon, including my own. Really good stuff, and I really enjoyed all of it. If I played your prototype at BGGCon, understand that it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for bringing me into your design process. I hope that any of my feedback or any of the actions that I took while playing your game helped you to make it a better game. If you played one of my games at BGGCon, sincerely, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Whether you just enjoyed yourself, or you gave me some constructive feedback, or you helped me revamp a part of my game that wasn't working the night before I met with a publisher so that a publisher was interested in signing it, whereas they wouldn't have been interested in signing the version that you played, you know who you are. Thank you, guys. All of you. There's nothing I like more than having players play my games, and it's really a gift that you guys give to me. I just hope that I can keep tweaking them and hammering on them and making them a little bit better so that the next time you play them, it's an even better experience for you. That's what I really love. So that's it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I think this is going to be my last BGGCon video. Now that I've finished recording this, I'm finally going to remove my bracelet, because I feel like that's official closure with BGGCon, and thank you guys for coming along with me for the ride. Bearded Rogue, out.